A single father is under his truck on a quiet Saturday morning when two little girls come running down the street, screaming that their mama won't wake up. He drops everything and saves a stranger's life. But when he looks at the woman lying on that bedroom floor, something stirs in his memory, a feeling he can't explain, a face he swears he's seen before. What he discovers 3 days later, hidden in a box of old photographs in his closet, will reveal a secret that's been following him for 26 years. Before we continue, hit subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It's a quiet Saturday morning in a small Texas town. Wally Gallagher, a 34-year-old mechanic and single father, is under his beat-up Ford truck trying to fix a leaking oil pan. His hands are covered in grease. Country music is playing from his phone, and he's thinking about what to make his son for lunch. Just another ordinary weekend, right? But then he hears it. Two little girls, maybe 5 or 6 years old, identical twins with matching pink dresses, sprinting down the street toward him. Their faces are streaked with tears, their voices breaking with panic. "Help! Please help us! Mama's not waking up!" Now, Wally had seen a lot in his life. He'd been a single dad for 3 years after his wife left him and their son. He worked 60-hour weeks at the local auto shop, volunteered at the community center, and barely made ends meet. But nothing could have prepared him for what was about to unfold. And here's the thing that nobody expected. Not even Wally himself. The reason their mama wasn't waking up would reveal a secret that had been buried in that small town for over 20 years. A secret that connected Wally to those little girls in a way that would shock everyone who knew him. Wally didn't hesitate. The moment he saw those girls running toward him with absolute terror in their eyes, he dropped his wrench and scrambled out from under the truck. His first instinct was simple. Someone needed help, and he was going to provide it. The twins, Lindsay and Annie, were gasping for breath, their little chests heaving up and down. "She won't wake up," Lindsay sobbed, grabbing Wally's grease-stained hand. "We tried shaking her, but she just won't open her eyes." Wally's mind raced through possibilities. Medical emergency? Accident? Something worse? He asked the girls where they lived, and they pointed to a small yellow house 3 doors down. He'd seen that house a million times. A woman lived there, he knew that much, kept to herself mostly. He'd wave when he saw her getting the mail, she'd wave back. Standard neighbor stuff. But he'd never actually spoken to her. Now her daughters were standing in front of him, desperate and scared, and every second counted. "Okay, listen to me," Wally said, kneeling down to meet their eyes. His voice was calm, steady, even though his heart was pounding. "I'm going to help your mama, but I need you two to be brave for me. Can you do that?" Both girls nodded, still crying but trying to compose themselves. Wally stood up and called out to his own son, 12-year-old Brendan, who was inside the house. "Brendan, call 911. Tell them we have a possible medical emergency at 247 Maple Street, then stay inside." Wally ran toward the yellow house with the twins leading the way. His boots pounded against the pavement, and his mind was already shifting into emergency mode. He'd taken a basic first aid course years ago when Brendan was born, but he'd never had to use it for anything serious. This was real. This was life or death. The front door was wide open, swinging slightly in the breeze. That detail stuck with him. An open door on a Saturday morning. The twins led him through a tidy living room, past a Kit Gallagher where breakfast dishes were still on the table, half-eaten toast and cold coffee, and down a hallway to the master bedroom. What Wally saw when he entered that bedroom would haunt him in the best and worst ways possible. A woman, probably in her early 30s, was lying on the floor beside her bed. She was wearing pajamas, her dark hair spread around her head like a halo. Her face was pale, way too pale, and her lips had a slight blue tint. But here's what caught Wally's attention immediately. She was breathing. Shallow, irregular breaths, but breathing. She wasn't dead. Not yet. But something was very, very wrong. Wally dropped to his knees beside her and checked her pulse. It was there, but weak and thready. He noticed an empty pill bottle on the nightstand. His stomach dropped. He picked it up and read the label. Prescription sleeping pills. The bottle contained 30 pills and was filled just 2 days ago. Now it was empty. Next to it was a glass of water and a handwritten note. Wally didn't read the note. He didn't need to. The scene told him everything. This wasn't an accident. This was a suicide attempt. But here's where things get complicated. And this is the first hint of what would eventually turn this entire story on its head. When Wally looked at the woman's face, really looked at it, something stirred in the back of his mind. A memory he couldn't quite place. A familiarity that didn't make sense. He'd never met this woman before, had he? He would remember. But there was something about the shape of her eyes, the curve of her jaw, something that whispered to him like a ghost from his past. He didn't have time to think about it. The ambulance was coming. He could hear sirens in the distance, but she needed help now. Wally had learned in his first aid course that if someone overdoses on pills, you need to keep them awake if possible, keep them breathing, and wait for professionals. He gently rolled her onto her side, the recovery position, to make sure she wouldn't choke if she vomited. "Hey," he said firmly, patting her cheek. "Hey, can you hear me? Stay with me. Your girls need you. Lindsay and Annie need you." At the mention of her daughter's names, the woman's eyelids fluttered. Just barely. But it was something. "That's it," Wally encouraged. "Come on, stay with me. Help is coming." Behind him, he could hear the twins crying in the hallway. His son Brendan had arrived and was keeping them company, talking to them in a soft voice, trying to distract them. Good kid. Wally had raised him well. The paramedics arrived within minutes, though it felt like hours. They burst into the room with practiced efficiency, and Wally stepped back to give them space. He quickly explained what he'd found. The empty pill bottle, her condition when he arrived, everything he'd done. The lead paramedic, a woman named Hilda, who Wally recognized from around town, nodded grimly and immediately got to work. They administered activated charcoal, set up an IV, checked her vitals, and prepared to transport her to the hospital. "Is she going to make it?" Wally asked. He surprised himself by how much he cared about the answer. This was a stranger. But those little girls in the hallway, they weren't strangers anymore. And somehow, for some reason he couldn't explain, this woman didn't feel like a stranger either. "You got here fast," Hilda said, not really answering his question. "That's what matters. Another 30 minutes, and we'd be having a different conversation." She looked at him with respect. "You saved her life." The woman, whose name Wally learned was Hilda Haggard, was rushed to County General Hospital. She was stabilized, but the doctors said she'd need to stay for observation and psychiatric evaluation. Standard procedure for suicide attempts. Meanwhile, Wally found himself in an unexpected position. The twins had no other family. Their father wasn't in the picture. Hilda's parents were deceased, and there were no siblings or close relatives listed in any emergency contacts. Child Protective Services was called, and they were going to place Lindsay and Annie in temporary foster care until their mother recovered. Wally saw the terror in those little girls' eyes when the CPS worker explained this to them. They'd already been through hell that morning. Their mama had tried to leave them, and now they were being taken away from their home too? Lindsay clung to Wally's leg like he was a life raft in a storm. "Please don't let them take us," she whispered. "We'll be good. We promise we'll be good." Something broke inside Wally's chest. He looked at Brendan, who was standing in the doorway with that same protective expression Wally had seen in the mirror his whole life. Without thinking, Wally heard himself say, "What if they stayed with me? Just temporarily, until their mom gets better. I have space. My son can help. It's better than putting them in the system with strangers, right?" The CPS worker, a tired-looking woman named Patricia, raised her eyebrows. "Mr. Gallagher, that's very generous. But we have procedures. Background checks, Home evaluations, it's not that simple. Then make it simple, Wally said. His voice was firm but not aggressive. Those girls just watched their mama almost die. They need stability. They know me now. I'm right down the street from their house. I can take them to visit their mom at the hospital. I'm already on file with the county because I volunteer at the community center. Check whatever you need to check, but please don't put them through more trauma today. Patricia looked at Wally for a long moment, then at the twins, then back at Wally. Finally, she sighed. I'll make some calls. If you check out, and I mean if everything checks out perfectly, we can do an emergency placement. But this is highly irregular, Mr. Gallagher. Highly irregular. It took 6 hours. 6 hours of background checks, character references, home inspection, and paperwork. But by early evening, Lindsay and Annie were officially in Wally's temporary care. Brendan set up the guest room for them, putting fresh sheets on the bed and arranging his old stuffed animals on the pillows. Wally ordered pizza, and they all sat around the Kit Gallagher table in awkward silence until Brendan started telling silly jokes that actually made the twins giggle. That night, after the girls were finally asleep, Wally sat in his living room with a beer he didn't drink and tried to process everything. His quiet Saturday had turned into something completely unexpected. He was now responsible for 3 kids instead of 1. But that wasn't what was bothering him. What bothered him was that nagging feeling, that sense of familiarity when he looked at Hilda Haggard. Where had he seen her before? The answer came 3 days later, and it came from the most unexpected source, a shoebox hidden in the back of his closet. Wally was looking for extra blankets for the girls when he accidentally knocked the box down. Old photographs spilled across the floor, pictures from his childhood, his teenage years, his wedding, Brendan as a baby. He was about to scoop them all back in when one particular photo caught his eye. It was from his 8th birthday party. His mom had thrown him a surprise party at the local park. There were kids everywhere, balloons, a superhero cake. And there, in the background of the photo, partially hidden behind a tree, was a little girl, maybe 7 years old. Dark hair, familiar eyes, a shy smile. Wally's hand started shaking. He grabbed another photo, this one from a school field trip in 5th grade. There she was again, sitting 3 rows behind him on the bus. He never noticed her before. Why would he? But now that he was looking, really looking, he couldn't unsee it. He grabbed more photos. Middle school graduation. There. High school football game. There. His senior prom. There, in the parking lot getting into a car. Hilda Haggard had been following him for over 20 years. Wally didn't sleep that night. His mind was spinning with possibilities, none of them good. Was Hilda a stalker? Had she deliberately moved to his street? Were the twins even in danger? He needed answers, and there was only one person who could give them to him. The next morning, he called Patricia from CPS and explained that he needed to visit Hilda at the hospital. Patricia agreed to watch the girls for a few hours. Wally told Brendan to stay home from school and help out. County General Hospital smelled like antiseptic and sadness. Wally had always hated hospitals. They reminded him of when his dad died of cancer when Wally was 16. The machines beeping, the fluorescent lights, the desperate hope mixed with inevitable loss. He found Hilda's room on the 3rd floor, psychiatric ward. A nurse checked his ID and allowed him in with a warning. "She's fragile right now, Mr. Gallagher. Please be gentle." Hilda was sitting up in bed, staring out the window. She looked small in the hospital gown, vulnerable in a way that made Wally's anger deflate slightly. When she heard him enter, she turned, and her eyes widened with something that looked like shame mixed with relief. "You came," she whispered. "I need answers," Wally said, closing the door behind him. He pulled up a chair but didn't sit. "I found photos. You've been in my life since we were kids. Why? What's going on? Are my son and your daughters safe? I need the truth, Hilda. All of it." Tears immediately filled Hilda's eyes, but she nodded. You deserve the truth. I owe you that. I owe you everything, actually. She took a shaky breath. Sit down, Wally. This is going to take a while. Wally sat. Hilda clutched her blanket like it was armor and began to speak. We met when we were 7 years old, at your 8th birthday party. I lived in the neighborhood back then. My family was going through a rough time. My parents fought constantly. My older brother was in and out of jail, and I was the invisible kid who got lost in the chaos. I didn't have friends. I was too shy, too scared of everything. But then I saw you at that party. She smiled sadly at the memory. You were so kind. You noticed me hiding behind that tree, and you brought me a piece of cake. You didn't know me. I wasn't invited. I was just some weird kid lurking around. But you shared your birthday cake with me. You asked me my name. You asked if I wanted to play. It was the first time anyone had shown me genuine kindness in years. Maybe ever. Wally vaguely remembered that moment now. A girl behind a tree. He'd thought she looked hungry. That was you. That was me, Hilda confirmed. And from that day on, you became my hero. I know how that sounds. I know it sounds crazy and obsessive. But you have to understand, I was a broken kid looking for light in the darkness, and you were the brightest light I'd ever seen. I started going to places I knew you'd be, not to talk to you. I was too scared for that, but just to watch you be kind to other people. You helped the special needs kid in our class when others made fun of him. You stood up to bullies. You visited nursing homes with your church group. You were everything good in the world. Wally shifted uncomfortably. This was getting weird. Hilda, I know, she interrupted. I know it's unhealthy. Believe me, I know. As I got older, I realized how wrong it was. I tried to stop. I went to college across the country specifically to get away, to build my own life. I got therapy. I met someone, got married, had my girls. I thought I was better. But my husband turned out to be abusive. He left bruises where people couldn't see them. He controlled every aspect of my life. And one day, when it got really bad, when I thought he was going to kill me, I remembered you. I remembered that 8-year-old boy who showed kindness to a stranger, and I found the courage to leave. Wally's expression softened despite himself. I'm sorry that happened to you. After the divorce, I was lost again, Hilda continued. I had full custody of the twins, but I had no money, no support system, no idea how to rebuild. I moved around a lot, different towns, different jobs. And then, about 8 months ago, I saw your picture in a local newspaper. You were volunteering at a food drive. The article said you were a single dad raising your son alone. It said you lived in this town. And I thought, maybe, just maybe, being near someone good again would help me find my way. So I moved here. I bought that house on your street. You've been watching me for 8 months, Wally asked, trying to keep his voice level. No, Hilda said firmly. I've been living my life near yours. There's a difference. I never approached you. I never tried to involve you in my problems. I just needed to know that good people still existed, that kindness still existed. You were my proof. And it was working, Wally. For the first time in years, I was getting better. I had a job I liked. The girls were happy in school. I was starting to feel like maybe I could build a real life. So what happened? Wally asked. Why the pills? Why try to end it? Hilda's face crumbled. I got a letter last week. My ex-husband found us. He's getting out of prison early. He threatened to take the girls. Said he has a lawyer. Said he'd prove I was an unfit mother. Said he'd make my life hell. I panicked. I thought the girls would be better off without me. That they could go to a foster family who could actually protect them. I thought I was doing them a favor by removing myself from the equation. I wasn't thinking clearly. I was just so scared and tired and broken. The room fell silent except for the sound of Hilda crying. Wally sat there, processing everything. This was insane. This was beyond anything he'd ever dealt with. But looking at Hilda, broken and honest and desperate, he didn't see a stalker. He saw a trauma survivor who'd latched onto a memory of kindness because she'd known so little of it. It was unhealthy, yes. But was it dangerous? He didn't think so. Was it understandable? Maybe. Human beings do strange things when they're desperate for hope. Wally visited Hilda in the hospital every day for the next week. The girls asked about their mama constantly, and he brought them to visit twice, supervised by hospital staff. Hilda was getting better, slowly but surely. The medication was helping, and she was working with a psychiatrist and a therapist. More importantly, she was finally opening up about everything she'd been through. During one of Wally's solo visits, Hilda asked him a question that changed everything again. "Have you looked into my ex-husband? Have you checked to see if what he said in that letter was true?" Wally admitted he hadn't. He'd been so focused on taking care of the girls and processing the stalking revelation that he hadn't thought to verify the threat. Hilda reached into her bedside drawer and pulled out a crumpled envelope. "This is the letter. I brought it with me in the ambulance. I don't know why. Maybe I knew someone would need to see it." Wally read the letter. It was typed, not handwritten, and it was vicious. Threats about taking the girls, about proving Hilda was unstable, about making her regret leaving him. It was signed James Haggard. But something about it felt off to Wally. The language was too formal, too legal. It read like someone trying to sound threatening rather than someone who actually was threatening. "Have you actually verified that he's getting out of prison?" Wally asked. Hilda blinked. "What do you mean? Have you called the prison? Checked with your lawyer? Confirmed any of this information?" She shook her head slowly. "I just saw the letter and fell apart. I didn't even think to check." Wally pulled out his phone. It took him 20 minutes and 4 phone calls, but he got his answer. James Haggard was not getting out of prison. In fact, his sentence had been extended due to bad behavior. He wouldn't be eligible for parole for another 8 years. The letter was a fake, but who sent it? That answer came from an unexpected source: Wally's son, Brendan. The 12-year-old had become close with the twins over the past week, playing with them, reading them stories, being the big brother they'd never had. One evening, while Wally was making dinner, Brendan came to him with one of the twins' tablets. "Dad, you need to see this." On the tablet was an email account, and in the sent folder was a copy of the letter that had been sent to Hilda. But the email account didn't belong to James Haggard. It belonged to someone named Margaret Sullivan. Wally didn't recognize the name, but Hilda did when he called her immediately. "That's James's mother," she said, her voice hollow. "She never forgave me for leaving him. She always blamed me for his arrest. She swore she'd make me pay." Wally felt rage boil up inside him. A woman had almost died because of a lie. 2 little girls had almost lost their mother because of vindictive cruelty. "We're going to the police," he said. "This is harassment, intimidation, possibly attempted murder by proxy. She needs to be held accountable." Hilda was hesitant at first. She'd been afraid for so long that standing up felt impossible. But Wally and his persistence gave her courage. They went to the police with the evidence. The investigation took a few weeks, but Margaret Sullivan was eventually charged with criminal harassment and reckless endangerment. She'd been waging a psychological warfare campaign against Hilda for months, sending anonymous messages, making fake social media accounts, trying to break her mentally. The fake letter about James's release had been the final blow. With Margaret arrested and James confirmed to be locked up for years, Hilda finally felt safe. But more than that, she finally felt ready to heal properly. 3 months after that terrible Saturday morning, life had settled into a new rhythm. Hilda was released from the hospital after completing an intensive outpatient therapy program. She was on medication, seeing a therapist twice a week, and slowly rebuilding her confidence. The twins were thriving. They'd stayed with Wally for 6 weeks during Hilda's recovery, and the experience had transformed all of them. Brendan discovered that he actually liked having little sisters around. He taught them how to ride bikes, helped them with homework, and protected them fiercely at school when other kids asked too many questions about their mom. Wally discovered that his capacity for love was bigger than he'd imagined. Caring for 3 kids instead of 1 was exhausting, but it was also fulfilling in ways he hadn't expected. And Hilda, well, Hilda discovered something she never expected to find: a real family. Not the obsessive, one-sided attachment she'd had for years, but genuine, reciprocal relationships. Wally became her friend, a real friend, the kind who showed up with groceries when she was having a bad day and didn't judge her for her past mistakes. Brendan became her honorary son, calling her Miss Hilda and bragging to his friends about his extra family down the street. The 4 kids, because that's what they were now, 4 kids in an extended family unit, became inseparable. They had family dinners twice a week, alternating houses. They went to the park together, had movie nights, and celebrated birthdays as one big group. It was unconventional, sure, but it worked. Wally and Hilda never became romantic. That's not what this story is about. Some people thought they should get together. It would make a nice ending. The single dad and the single mom finding love. But they both knew that wasn't right. Hilda needed to love herself before she could love anyone else. And Wally needed to be a friend, not a savior. What they built was something better than romance. They built trust, respect, and a chosen family. But here's the twist that nobody saw coming. The piece of information that recontextualizes this entire story. Remember how Wally felt that strange familiarity when he first saw Hilda? Remember how there was something about her eyes, her face, that stirred old memories? Well, 6 months after the incident, Wally's aunt passed away. She'd been the family historian, the keeper of old photos and documents. While going through her belongings, Wally found a box labeled Family Tree Project. Inside that box was a detailed genealogy chart that his aunt had been working on for years. And there, in the branches of his family tree, was a name that made his heart stop. Hilda Catherine Sullivan. His aunt had traced the family back 7 generations and discovered something that had been lost to time. Hilda Haggard. Formerly Hilda Sullivan before her marriage, was Wally's 3rd cousin. They shared great-great-grandparents who'd immigrated from Ireland to America in the 1920s. But it gets even more incredible than that. Those shared ancestors had a famous story in the family. During their immigration, they'd been separated at Ellis Island due to paperwork errors. It took them 3 years to find each other again. When they finally reunited, they made a promise. Their descendants would always look out for each other. Family would always protect family. This story had been passed down through generations, but the family connections had been lost over time as people moved, changed names, lost touch. Hilda and Wally had been family all along. That 8-year-old boy who'd shared his birthday cake with a lonely girl? He'd been following an instinct that was literally in his blood. That pull Hilda felt toward Wally's kindness, it was ancestral recognition, a genetic echo of a promise made 100 years ago. They were connected not by obsession or coincidence, but by blood and history, and a family oath about protecting each other. When Wally showed Hilda the family tree, they both cried. Everything made sense now. The familiarity, the protective instinct that made Wally run toward danger when those girls called for help. The reason Hilda had felt safe near him for all those years. They were family. They'd always been family. They'd just forgotten. The revelation healed something in Hilda that therapy never could. She hadn't been crazy. She hadn't been obsessive in a creepy way. She'd been drawn to family, to a connection she couldn't consciously remember, but felt in her bones. And Wally understood now why he'd been so willing to take in 2 strange girls, why he'd fought the system to keep them close, why he'd invested so much in helping Hilda heal. It wasn't just kindness, it was family. Today, almost a year after that terrifying Saturday morning, the Gallagher-Haggard family is still going strong. Yes, they call themselves that now. The Gallagher-Haggard family. Wally officially became the twins' godfather, a legal designation that means he'll always have a say in their welfare. Hilda got a promotion at her job and bought a house just 2 doors down from Wally, even closer than before. But this time, it wasn't about watching from a distance. It was about being close to family. Brendan is 13 now and has fully embraced his role as big brother to 2 little sisters. The twins, Lindsay and Annie, are in therapy too, processing their trauma in age-appropriate ways, and they're doing remarkably well. They know their mama had a really bad day, but she got help, and now she's okay. They know they have Uncle Wally and Big Brother Brendan who will always protect them. They know they're safe. Hilda still has hard days. Recovery isn't linear. But she's built a support system now. She has Wally. She has friends from her therapy group. She has coworkers who check on her. She's not alone anymore. And she's learned to ask for help instead of drowning in silence. The guilt she carried about the stalking, which is what she still called it sometimes, had been reframed through the lens of family connection. Her therapist helped her understand that while her coping mechanism had been unhealthy, her instinct to seek family wasn't wrong. She just needed to learn healthy ways to connect. Wally got something out of this too. He'd been alone for so long, raising Brendan by himself, working constantly, never taking time for his own needs. The expanded family forced him to slow down, to accept help, to realize that asking for support isn't weakness. He'd always been the helper, never helped. Now he understood that real strength means being vulnerable enough to let others in. And that promise from their ancestors about protecting family, they take it seriously now. They researched their family history together, found other lost branches of the family tree, and started reconnecting with distant relatives. They discovered a whole network of people who shared their blood, their history, their story. Some of those relatives had also felt strange pulls toward certain people or places without understanding why. It turned out genetic memory and ancestral connection were more powerful than any of them had realized. The twins asked their mama all the time about the day she wouldn't wake up. Hilda is honest with them in age-appropriate ways. She tells them that sometimes mamas get sick in their minds, just like people get sick in their bodies. She tells them she got help, and she's better now. She tells them that Uncle Wally saved her life, which is true. But she also tells them that they saved her life too by being brave enough to ask for help. She teaches them that asking for help is the strongest thing you can do. Wally still fixes trucks in his driveway on Saturday mornings, but now he has 4 kids running around, playing, laughing, living. Sometimes he stops and watches them and thinks about how different his life could have been if he hadn't heard those girls crying, if he'd ignored them, if he'd been too busy or too selfish to care. 2 little girls would have lost their mama. A woman would have died alone. And he never would have discovered the family he didn't know he had. The yellow house 3 doors down isn't a mystery anymore. It's family. The woman who lived there isn't a stranger. She's Cousin Hilda, 3rd cousin to be exact, but family nonetheless. And those twin girls aren't just kids he helped once. They're Lindsay and Annie Gallagher-Haggard, his goddaughters, his blood, his family. This story could have ended a dozen different ways. Hilda could have died. The twins could have been lost in the foster system. Wally could have walked away, citing the stalking as too weird, too complicated. Margaret Sullivan could have succeeded in destroying Hilda's life. Any number of tragedies could have occurred. But they didn't, because one person chose kindness. One person heard a cry for help and responded. That's the real lesson here. Not the family twist, though that's incredible. Not the happy ending, though everyone deserves one. The real lesson is that kindness matters. That 8-year-old boy who shared his birthday cake with a lonely girl didn't know he was planting a seed that would grow into a life-saving connection 26 years later. He just knew someone looked sad, and he had cake. That's it. Simple kindness. And here's what's even more powerful. Wally had been showing kindness his whole life to hundreds of people without knowing the impact. The special needs kid he protected in school? That kid went on to become a successful artist who creates programs for disabled youth. The elderly people he visited at nursing homes? 3 of them told him before they died that his visits were the only thing that gave them hope. The co-workers he helped when they were struggling? They paid it forward to others. Kindness creates ripples. You never know when a simple act of decency will save someone's life. You never know when sharing your cake will create a connection that echoes through generations. You never know when stopping to help will reveal that the stranger you're helping is actually family. Hilda's therapist told her something that stuck with both her and Wally. She said that humans are designed to connect, to build tribes, to protect each other. In our modern world, we've lost that somehow. We walk past suffering. We ignore cries for help. We assume someone else will step up. But our ancestors knew better. They knew that survival meant community. They knew that family, both blood and chosen, was everything. They knew that protecting each other wasn't optional. It was essential. The promise that Wally and Hilda's ancestors made 100 years ago, that their descendants would always look out for each other, wasn't unique. It was the same promise every family, every tribe, every community throughout human history has made. We protect each other. We show up. We help. That's what humans do when we're at our best. Wally doesn't consider himself a hero. Ask him about that day, and he'll shrug and say he did what anyone would do. But that's not true. Not everyone would have stopped. Not everyone would have cared. Not everyone would have fought to keep those girls close instead of letting the system swallow them. Not everyone would have visited Hilda in the hospital and listened to her story without judgment. Not everyone would have helped her stand up to her abuser's family. Wally did all of that because kindness was his default setting, and that's the kind of person we all should aspire to be. Not perfect. Wally isn't perfect. He gets frustrated, he makes mistakes, he has bad days. But when it matters, when someone is crying out for help, he shows up. That's the standard. That's what kindness looks like in action. The Gallagher-Haggard family recently celebrated what they call Family Day, the anniversary of the day Wally heard those twins crying and everything changed. They spent it at the same park where 8-year-old Wally met 7-year-old Hilda, completing the circle. They had a picnic, played games, and Wally made sure there was extra cake to share with any lonely kids who might be watching from behind trees. Lindsay and Annie are 7 now, thriving in school, and showing early signs of wanting to help people just like their Uncle Wally. Lindsay wants to be a doctor. Annie wants to be a teacher. Both of them want to make sure that no kid ever feels as scared as they did that Saturday morning. Brendan is applying to colleges and has decided he wants to study social work. Watching his dad help Hilda and the twins showed him what real impact looks like. He wants to be the person who helps families stay together, who fights for kids, who shows up when others walk away. Hilda is writing a book about her experience. Her therapist suggested it as part of her healing process, but it turned into something more. She wants other people who are struggling to know that it's possible to come back from the edge, that asking for help isn't a weakness, that sometimes the family you need has been there all along, waiting for you to recognize them. And Wally? Wally is still fixing trucks on Saturday mornings, still volunteering at the community center, still showing up for people who need help. The only difference is now he has a bigger family cheering him on, learning from him, and occasionally reminding him that heroes need help too. The yellow house 3 doors down has a new sign in the front yard now. It says, "The Haggard House," with a smaller line underneath that reads, "Part of the Gallagher-Haggard family." It's a statement of connection, of belonging, of finally finding home. Next to it is Wally's house with a matching sign. They're a family now, unconventional and complicated and beautiful. Hilda still thinks about that day sometimes, the day she tried to give up. She thinks about how close she came to never seeing her daughters grow up. But she doesn't think about it with shame anymore. She thinks about it with gratitude, because that day led her to the family she'd been searching for her whole life. That day taught her that even in the darkest moment, help can come from unexpected places. That day showed her that the instinct she'd followed for 26 years, the pull toward Wally's kindness, had been right all along. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, when both families are together, Hilda looks at Wally and remembers that 8-year-old boy with birthday cake. She remembers how one small act of kindness saved her life twice. Once when she was 7 and needed to know good people existed, and once when she was 32 and needed someone to physically save her life. The same person, the same kindness, 26 years apart. It's enough to make you believe in destiny. Or at least in the power of family, blood, and promises made by people who came before us. The story of the single dad who was fixing his truck when twin girls ran to him crying could have been a tragedy. Instead, it became a testimony to the power of showing up, the importance of kindness, and the incredible truth that sometimes the family you need has been there all along, just waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. If you take nothing else from this story, take this. Listen when someone asks for help. Share your cake with the lonely kid behind the tree. Fix more than just trucks on Saturday mornings. Be the person who runs toward a crisis instead of away from it. Because you never know when that kindness will save a life, reunite a family, or fulfill a promise made by your ancestors 100 years ago. That's not just a feel-good message. It's a blueprint for how we should live. And if Wally Gallagher, a single dad who works 60-hour weeks and barely makes ends meet, can change the world through simple kindness, then so can you.